This video started out as an overview of the Flamethrower after its nerf, what my take on the weapon and its alternatives were, and a few theories on what was going on in Arrowhead Studios and why the player base is so upset over what's been going on. I will talk about that stuff, of course, but the research and recording and talking with people on both sides of this debacle has been nothing short of exhausting. The constant bickering and non-arguments that are more like having conversations at one another instead of with one another. The videos with names like "The devs must be stopped" and "Players call for the game to end," accompanied by attempted review bombs, video essays, and Liberty knows what else. Anytime I try to get a coherent argument out of people, it generally amounts to "the devs hate fun" or "the players just suck." Even as I was writing this new script, I was listening to video essays trying to get a better idea of what the hell is even going on, and I still feel a bit confused. To be completely transparent, I like this game, and I don't really have an opinion on the Escalation of Freedom nerfs. I never liked the Flamethrower much to begin with, and I didn't have the chance to unlock the Breaker Incendiary before the changes. I can't be attached to things I never used. I'm one of those boring people that typically prefers to see things get done right and see my team function like a well-oiled machine instead of employing goofy builds and strategies. If the job gets done and done well, I don't care what you're running, but I'd appreciate it if you stopped running the Team Killer Special just because you think 380mm Barrage and Arc-Thrower are cool. Speaking of, it's very apparent to me, at least after all my research, that what the player base wants and what the advertising promised is at odds with what Arrowhead seems to intend for what the game is supposed to feel like. The advertising promised a kind of cinematic power fantasy paired with a parody of the War on Terror era, accompanied by a mix of Terminator and Starship Troopers inspiration mixed in, and most of the players were happy to get behind that. Meanwhile, Arrowhead seems to want the game to feel like you're not an overpowered badass, and instead are the faithless fanatical fodder the Helldivers really are in canon, which means overwhelming odds, a lot of dying, and weapons that are just barely good enough to do what they're supposed to do. Maybe because of the sheer mass production they have to be made for? I don't know, that's what I would say if I was them. I don't find either approach to be inherently bad, but I think we'd all benefit if Arrowhead Studios would come out and just state what Helldivers is supposed to be. Is it a hard-as-nails horde shooter where teamwork is key? Or a cinematic action game where you get to feel like a badass future soldier and clown around with your friends? As it stands, it feels like it's somewhere in the middle, and it's a bit awkward. The lower difficulties are great for goofing around, but also tend to not get you much of anything, while the higher difficulties are much more rewarding, but tend to be less fun, due in no small part to the selection of enemies on display for us to turn into Swiss cheese. I'm going to start off with the automatons, hereafter referred to as bots, because if I have to type automaton every time I refer to them, I'm going to lose my mind. I have a bit more experience fighting them, and quite frankly I think they're a better designed faction than the bugs, but I'll get to that in a bit. The bots are often seen as the harder, more intimidating faction of the two because they incorporate heavy armor into their designs a lot. And while it is true that the bots require a bit of thought to properly dismantle, it's mostly intuitive stuff. See that bright glowing part on the back? Shoot that with the biggest weapon you have. See a huge, slow enemy moving towards you? Drop a bomb on it. See that swarm of bullets coming at your face? Get behind something solid. And as you learn more about how less obvious weak points work, the bots become even less threatening. Shoot the Strider's legs out from under them for an instant kill, disarm a Heavy Devastator if you can't headshot it reliably, watch out for the Rocket Devastator signature stance before firing, and know that in general weapons are weak points. This one in particular makes Hulks, Factory Striders, and Reinforced Scout Striders a lot less scary and easier to actually kill without having to worry about them decimating you. In my opinion, the only addition to their roster that really changed how you play against them is the aforementioned Factory Strider, which has what can be generously called a buttload of HP, enough firepower to level a small city, and weak points that aren't super intuitive but aren't hard to figure out. They're even slower than normal and are easily outran if you don't want to deal with one, and are about as subtle as a drunk bull in a preschool. Which is to say it's causing a racket and absolutely flattening the tiny people around it, but the odds of it ever really sneaking up on you are basically none. But not zero. The rocket tank is probably the second most game-changing, but only in the sense that it can fire over cover. Otherwise, it still has a weak point in the back of the vehicle, on the engine bay, and follows the general bot rule of when a big thing touches down, blow it up immediately. It still only takes one stratagem to destroy it, but it is worth noting that these things could see the generators in your evacuate assets missions from across the map and fire at them. I haven't found the trick for winning these missions against them yet, but apparently it's very possible. Which brings us neatly along to the Terminids, which I will be calling bugs for the same reason as before. It would drive me insane using the proper name over and over again. And let me tell you, I have some major issues with the bugs overall, and it seems like every addition to their roster just makes the situation worse. And while the bots generally emphasize tactical play with cover, retreating and positioning being integral to fighting every single unit they field, the bugs seem focused on trying to stop you from engaging with them in the only manner that works. Leapers easily outpace you, chargers knock you on your ass, which prevents moving, those green bile artillery bugs shoot you from across the map and over cover, and the impaler does this. On top of that, any bug that does acid damage also reduces your movement speed, worst of all being the hunters, which not only keep pace with you easily no matter what, but also spawn by the dozens. Not to mention the ridiculous rate at which chargers spawn and how hard it is to take even one down in the first place. I mentioned that the bots are generally fairly sensible with their weak points. Shoot the bright glowy spots, the heads, the weapons, etc. But the bugs don't really do that. See that bright glowy spot on the bug's body that looks like it's completely unarmored? Yeah, that's actually a part with 90% damage reduction. Sorry bud, hope you brought a rocket. While this is a bit silly with the bile spewers, it's a whole lot worse with the chargers. These beefcake bugs have armor thicker than the average Pixar mom on the front of their bodies, and a bright orange patch on their abdomen that most weapons can pierce and damage. But that's not a weak point. That area takes no increased damage at all, despite it being a traditional kick-me note on every enemy like this in every other video game ever. Instead, its actual weak point is the legs, which are covered by the previously mentioned armor. If you can strip the armor somehow, you'll down a charger in a few seconds with most weapons. But most weapons also can't get through the outer layer of armor in the first place, aren't ideal for the rest of the bugs, or hit it so hard you may as well just keep hitting it through the armor anyways. The Flamethrower is a great catch-all weapon for bugs because it cleaves through chaff enemies while also bypassing the charger's thick frontal armor, but now it doesn't. As an aside, the Impaler's weak spot is similar except it's the back leg specifically. What? I personally agree with the assessment that the Flamer was overperforming and should be an anti-chaff weapon first and foremost, like the machine gun, stalwart, and laser cannon. But its loss as a catch-all really drags how frustrating the bug's design choices are to the surface, particularly with the sheer number of chargers spawning at high levels. They also nerfed its anti-chaff abilities by letting the fire be body blocked for some reason? Like what? Now it's at best a minor side grade to the basic machine gun, with an annoying startup, less upfront damage, less range, and the ability to spray the ground to set a fire trap. Which is a nice ability, but not enough to convince me to ever use it over the other various machine guns, except maybe the Stalwart, because the Stalwart is booty. These nerfs apply to fire overall, which is doubly confusing because they decided to do this just before the Freedom's Flame Warbond was released. You know, the warbond that specializes in fire weapons. It comes off as an extremely bizarre choice, even if a number of the weapons inside the Warbond are genuinely still good. Shout out to the Cookout for having a hilarious name while still being a super viable shotgun. But without the Flamer, bug missions get significantly more difficult and I'd argue significantly less fun. In some ways I'd even say they're harder than the bots now. At least you can run from the bots chasing you. I think the problem is less the Flamethrower was nerfed and more that the Terminids are just really not fun at high difficulties. The constant ragdolling by chargers, and especially impalers, genuinely makes the bots feel like a pleasant walk in comparison. And while I can talk about buffs and nerfs and other changes I would make all day, it ultimately does not matter because all the creative decisions are in Arrowhead's hands, not mine, and not yours. And I think that constant escalation of how brutal the enemies are while the players lose their most overtuned tools is what makes the players as animated as they are. That and the interesting responses the developers have made on social media platforms and the various forums. I don't know exactly what's going on over there in that Swedish broom closet they built this game in, but it's not a great look. That being said, this isn't all Arrowhead's fault. Yeah, they're really out of touch with the current situation and they have some very strange ideas on game design, but the sheer level of backlash resulting from all this is kind of extreme too. I already mentioned the various video essays and rant posts about this, but the sheer vitriol I've seen coming from people is way out of proportion. review bombs, discouraging people from trying the game, actively encouraging others to sabotage the galactic war, which, as a reminder, is not scripted. These are the kind of responses I saw when Overwatch was imploding, when Star Wars Battlefront 2 tried to pull that loot box garbage, whenever Wargaming or Gaijin tried to pull one of their little stunts, or when Blizzard got into their, situation. Honestly, I think people might be more mad over the Escalation of Freedom patch than they were over Blizzard literally abusing people in the most uncomfortable ways possible. Where is this kind of rage when actually important things are happening? To be clear, pushback is a good thing. It lets the developers know something is going wrong somewhere. It's important to make your voices as a community heard. But trying to literally cause the game to implode, mostly over a nerf to a single weapon, is just asinine. Please go spend your energy on something better. That being said, both sides of this civil war do have a point. The Get Good crowd insists the tools we have now are more than enough to deal with any threats we face, just that it requires a bit of know-how and practice to get it down pat. What they don't acknowledge is that not everyone wants to put that kind of effort and time into their Orkin Man simulator, especially when the changes made to the game are genuinely annoying even for good players, let alone the bad ones that just want to see pretty fire and explosions. I don't care who you are, being run down by a herd of chargers and 20 plus hunters is not a fun experience. Meanwhile, the game suck now crowd seem to refuse the idea that anything could be remotely as fun or effective as the set they've decided they like to use for any and all situations. It doesn't matter that the basic breaker is better against the automatons, they will not swap off the breaker incendiary. It doesn't matter that the 380mm barrage is rarely useful and gets teammates killed at an alarming rate. It looks cool and makes the monkey brain happy, so they use it wherever they can, no matter the circumstance. And it doesn't matter that the mortar sentry is infamous for blasting your team apart because it's aiming at one scavenger to slip through to melee range. They like their explosions, so the sentry stays. Anyway, I'm tired of writing this script, and I'm tired of all this angry discourse. This has all left me very exhausted, and I'd like to finish up soon. Helldivers 2 is a mess of a game, and a chaotic mess at that. It's working off a discontinued engine that nobody had heard of in the first place, and is held together with glue sticks and prayers. The game randomly breaks, kills you for no discernible reason, does this, and even when it is running more or less as intended, it's not what I would call a balanced experience at any level. And that's not even mentioning things like the multitude of buffs the Bile Titan has gotten, the lack of a decent endgame, the generally barren and uninteresting terrains, the absolute state of some of the weapons, or the fact that the Flamethrower looks worse on top of playing worse. I still like this game, and I'll still play this game, because I tend to be able to excuse a poor technical performance if I find the game fun. Hell, I excuse a lot of things if I find the game fun. I play things like Smite, World of Warships, War Thunder, Stellaris, From the Depths, Pokemon, The Isle, Digimon games, Team Fortress 2, Xenoverse. I wouldn't call any of these games technical marvels, but I do enjoy the novelties and experiences they provide, so I keep playing them and I keep enjoying them. Helldivers 2 is a game in that vein, with a lot of questionable decisions and problems that run even deeper than the technical issues, but I do find it fun. And that's enough for me, I think. I just hope that's enough for everyone else, too. I was hoping to make this video and upload it while the controversy was still new to capitalize on the outrage and hopefully start a YouTube career of some sort, but I ended up being a little late to the party. You can like and subscribe if you want to. I might make some videos about Helldivers loadouts that are both fun and effective as the game continues to change and update, or I might make some videos about the games I mentioned earlier. I've been aching to build something from the depths recently, and I'm absolutely atrocious at War Thunder, so that might be kind of funny. Or you can just move along and not do all that YouTube stuff. I get it. Begging for offerings to the machine gods is pretty obnoxious. This little essay is mostly just a way to test the waters and see what kind of response I get. But whatever you decide to do, I'm tired now, and I'm going to go to sleep. Bye.